So today, continue with chapter 13, a long chapter that deals with do not let your left hand know what your right leg hand is doing. I'm dyslexic this morning, sorry. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. We today have to deal with the topic of compassion. We already covered the beneficence. We covered the many aspects of beneficence. And compassion is something that is absolutely essential for the exercise of charity, as we're going to see here. I'll let Soraya finish the whole topic, and then we'll talk about it later, okay?
Okay, so we'll begin.
Okay, you can finish the topic.
Okay. Compassion is the virtue that brings you closer to the angels. It is sibling of charity which leads you to God. Let your heart soften at the view of the miseries and sufferings of your fellow human beings. Your tears are like balm poured over their wounds, and when, through sweet sympathy, you manage to give them hope and resignation, what delight this will bring you. True, such delight is mixed with a hint of bitterness, for it is born alongside unhappiness. But it does not have the bitterness of worldly pleasures. It does not contain the poignant disappointments of the emptiness that the latter leave as an aftertaste. Instead, it possesses a penetrating sweetness that delights the soul. Compassion, when well felt, is love. Love is devotion. Devotion is forgetting oneself. And this forgetfulness, this abnegation toward the unfortunate, is a moral virtue per excellence, the one that the divine Messiah practiced all his life, in which he taught in his utterly holy and sublime tenet. When this tenet is restored to its original purity, and when it is accepted by all peoples, it will bring happiness to the world by finally establishing a reign of harmony and peace and love. When the sentiments that most likely will make you progress by taming your selfishness and your pride, that which you clothe your soul with humility, of beneficency and love of your neighbor. It is compassion, such compassion that takes you down to your very soul when witnessing the suffering of your brothers and sisters, which makes you reach out with a helping hand and move you to tears of deep sympathy. Therefore, never stifle in your hearts this celestial emotion. Do not act like these hardened, selfish people who move away from the afflicted, because the sight of their misery would disturb their joyful existence for an instant. Dread staying indifferent when you can be of help. Tranquility bought at the price of guilty indifference is like the tranquility of the Dead Sea, which hides stinking mud and rotten matter at the bottom of its waters. How far true compassion is from causing the trouble and the boredom dread by the selfish. Without a doubt, one's soul experiences in contact with the misfortune of others and by retreating into itself, a natural and deep seizure which makes vibrate all one's being and affecting it painfully. But this is a greatly compensated when you manage to give some courage and hope to an unhappy fellow being who is touched by the pressure of a friendly hand and whose gaze, moist with both emotion and gratitude, turns gently toward you before settling on the sky to thank God for having sent a consoler, a helper. Passion is the sad but celestial precursor of charity, this first of all virtues of which it is a sibling and with which it prepares and ennobles all acts of beneficency.
Thanks. feelings. Compassion is a big topic in spirituals. There are many, if we search the many letters, speeches regarding only with this one single topic is compassion. There is an emotion that derives of a sentiment. The word itself was brought to English from the Latin, but was taken from the Greek. And the root of the word is pathos, right? And we all the word pathology. So the word pathos has a few meanings, but the most important there of those meanings is a feeling of suffering, a feeling of feeling the suffering of others. Therefore, only pathos. No, pathos is disease. Disease is suffering. Disease is pain. Disease is hardship. We had the Passion of Christ, big movie that was all about suffering 24/7. The whole movie. And compassion would be with passion, so with suffering, with feeling the sentiment of suffering. So to have compassion towards someone is to feel the suffering of that someone, is to suffer with that someone. And that's what will guide us towards action. The spirit of Michael says over here, the charity or the compassion is the sister of charity. I see it more as the precursor of charity, because later on you'll say that the compassion leads us to act, and to act in love is charity. So I see more of compassion as a precursor that will lead us to exercise charity. Is when we feel in our skin the pain of our brother and sister that propels us to act, to move, to do something. And why the suffering? Why the pain? Because as Chico Xavier in an interview one time, he was asked if he was really happy in this world doing what he was doing, the work or all the blessings that you are able to receive to the spirits, and beyond all his hardship, he actually had reached happiness in his life. And his answer was no, because he cries every single day, witnessing the despair, the suffering around him. So his inability to reach happiness was not for his own problems, but his inability to reach happiness was because he suffered the pain of others. And if anyone who knows a minimum of the life of Chico Xavier, you see that he devoted himself to others basically 24/7. It's almost he was out of the equation and everybody else was the equation itself. And that is compassion. Is as the spirit, this Michael says over here, love is devotion. Devotion is forgetting oneself. Is this ability for us to take ourselves out of the equation and put the suffering, the pain of others into the equation that really defines compassion and that really moves us toward the exercise of charity in its most complete form. The Spirit of Michael gives us a warning over here. It is a very important one. Never smother this heavenly emotion in your heart. Do not do like those hardened, selfish people who avoid the afflicted because the sight of their misery would upset them for a few moments of their carefree lives. I think it's almost a natural self-defense mechanism that we would avoid witnessing the pain of our brothers and sisters, that you avoid uh, people who are suffering, that we would cross the street when you see that somebody's begging on that side of the street, that someone coming ask for money in the subway, you pretend they're sleeping, or whatever we do over there. I think in our anthropological development, evolution, progress, we almost had to be selfish in order to survive. You have to really take care of yourself to try to live another day. And with the paradigm of Christ, the invitation was to try to eliminate that sentiment, that attribute that we conquered throughout the millennia, try to survive another day, and say, I'm going to give you a new, better, easier, and more important paradigm, is that look, search for the suffering of your brothers and sisters, assist them, and the reward will be much greater than try to pretend that you have your eyes closed. Because when Christ came and bring to us this new paradigm, he opened our conscience, or better yet, he opened us to our own conscience. He invites us to review our own conscience where the divine laws are written. And the divine laws asks from us to do to others exactly what we would like others to do to us. And when we break this simple rule, simple and yet difficult, we create the conflict with our own conscience. And that is one of the things that limits our ability of being in peace or have happiness, because we don't have that state of peace. With our conscience, we have the conflict that does not allow us to ever be happy. And he completes it with the statement that's basically what I have just said. Peace of mind, bought at the price of culpable indifference, is the peace of mind of the Dead Sea, which hides fetid slime and the decay in its depth. If you live our lives running away of all the sufferings from our brothers and sisters, well, perhaps you have that very superficial feeling of being okay, of being happy. That's very often we say in our spirit sense the illusion of our happiness, that is not a true happiness. Because as it places over here, in the depth of ourselves, we have that fetid slime and decay in our depth. And where does it come from? Well, being disagreeable with our own conscience, where the divine laws reside. So in order to really rich state of happiness that is that we can conquer in this existing this world of trials and tribulations. And according to the spirits of Erasmus, it says happiness is attainable. Absolute happiness is not attainable in the world that you live, for this is a world of trials and tribulations, of enatonements. But we can have the relative happiness that's peace with your own conscience. So the most that you could conquer in this world would be to conquer that happiness attainable here to us with peace with our own conscience, and that comes from acting in accordance with the divine laws imprinted in its conscience. So we go back and reflect back to Chico Xavier when he says that he cannot really be happy over here because he has witnessed the suffering of everyone around him. He has the happiness basically that is attainable to us here because he is in peace with his own conscience, because his sentiments is in accordance, is agreeable with the laws imprinted in our conscience. So in Spiritism, we say that without charity, there is no salvation. But we can infer from what we just read here that without compassion, there is no charity. And we need that sentiment that provokes that emotion, and that emotion is something more physical, right? There's a more physicality, so to say, of the sentiment that makes us feel the need to act, feel the need to do something. And this act to do something is charity. So when we have, so if without charity there is no salvation, and if without compassion there is no charity, so it implies that without compassion there is no salvation. Now, this Spirit, when he made Mike, when he makes that suggestion to us not to hide it, I'm a little bit positive and optimistic that we do have it. There isn't there in us. Otherwise, you don't have to hide it. I like to believe that most of us, not only spiritists, I'm not talking about spiritists, I talk men and women incarnate in this planet, living the third millennium. We had lived long enough, reincarnated enough times that perhaps, being very optimistic, we have compassion. We're still just extremely selfish and extremely prideful to act on it, to hide it. That now you choose to hide it. And that's the suggestion that I think that is important for him is don't hide anymore. You work so hard to get to have it. Now that you have it, allow it to be there. Allow it to take priority on your lives, because that's what you propel you forward to exercise charity. And by exercise charity, we reach the salvation. And of course, over here, we mean the salvation is the transformation of our vices into virtues. It's not a miracle that happens to us. It's our exercising the slow, step-by-step evolutionary path of the eternal spirit to transform vices into virtues. To me, that's how I see salvation here. I think that's pretty much what I have to say on this topic. Any comments? Any questions?
I think compassion is an exercise, right? It's the same thing that we say about charity, right? That it's not something that it's part of our natural inclinations. Still at this stage, we already feel compassion, but we don't practice it as much as we should. And it's when it becomes part of who we are, which is what I think you described, what Chico Xavier was feeling. Then we reached a superior level of evolvement as an eternal spirit. But at the moment, it's something that we have to make an effort to practice on our daily lives, because it's not something natural yet to us.
And the compassion is the emotion that derives from the sentiment that leads to the action, that leads us to practice. And again, being optimistic, I think we have it, but we still don't. We still hide it. Most of the time, we still hide it. Once we do not hide it anymore, then we will practice. And when we practice, then it's charity. So charity is the action. Compassion is the sentiment that lead. It's the emotion. And I like to say the emotion because it's something more palpable in an ethereal sense, that we actually feel it in our gut. We feel that the suffering of our brothers and sisters that leads us to act. And that's why very often we try to pretend that we didn't see it, try to pretend that it escaped us, because we are still too selfish and too prideful to act, to allow it to take stage, and so we act.
And
Yes, Wayne.
Elmo, I had a question, and it probably relates to this. When I'm reading books, and like Andre Louise books, and there's they're describing the suffering around them, and this is common in a lot of books. There's a lot of things like the senior soul there is always described as, oh, he's tearful, he's crying, he's sobbing, he's it always seems like a little mushy. Mushy, not the right word.
I get it.
But it's the compassion that leads him to so much emotion?
I think you hit it right in the nail. I think it is. And that's why I like to say that it's almost palpable, it's almost visceral. And that's why I like to differentiate sentiment from the emotions. That emotion that is so palpable, it's in, you feel in the gut, really, that leads us to cry, that leads us to have that melancholic feeling that for us, hopefully it leads us to act. So another way that I see compassion is, let's say we are all right now using a computer. There is something that's required for us to use that computer. There is electricity. So the compassion would be the electricity that allows us to act, that allows the computer to act and us to act through the computer, what we're doing right now. So is that energy that propels us to take action, to act. And it propels us to act, to take action, because the sentiment is so profound that it transforms itself in that visceral emotion that you feel it. And that's why the word derives from pathos, from the Greek, meaning suffering, meaning feeling, meaning disease. We almost feel diseased. And that may be expressed into crying, may be expressed in a state of melancholy that leads us to try to get rid of that feeling or that emotion, and you do that through act. And the action will be exactly the exercise of charity. Now, as you were mentioned, the books, and I thought that's what I was going to say, and that escaped me completely, as we see also in the André Luiz books, many times, many times, I would say almost in every book, and Ron could help me and back me up here, that very often they are witness, André Luiz and the mentor in that particular book, they're witnessing an event, something happened, mostly in the physical plane, but also in the spiritual plane. And André Luiz, moved by compassion, wants to act, wants to do something, and is very often stopped by the mentor who knows better, who understands things better, and say, no, hands off, don't do anything. Which is interesting because now we are here talking about that generate that sentiment of empathy, that sentiment of feeling the pain of brothers and sisters becomes so strong that it transforms an emotion, that visceral pain that we have, that makes us cry, that makes us feel unhappy, that leads us to act. And very often a higher spirit will tell André Luiz, yeah, hold off, you're on your compassion right now. Leave it alone and move out. That seems many times as I'm reading a few, oh my God, really? Just go walk away from it. Because the exercise of charity requires in many occasions a better understanding of the whole picture of the complete situation. That up to those higher spirits, they have a much ample view of the whole thing than what we are. That it's proper to them to say, no, it's not the right time. No, all they can do right now is send our prayers at distance and, in a sense, let nature do its thing, so to say. I think it's a risk for most of us to take that path, the path of the higher spirits, and here on us be a little bit more like the ignorant André Luiz and act and do our part. I think then when in doubt, when we are in a crossroad, act. Now, naturally understand and know the situation. There are times that the right things to do is to take your hand off. The right thing to do is control your compassion, that against an emotion, and allows reason to prevail. Reason always must prevail of emotions. But when in a crossroad, at least personally, I think it's safer to act than not to act. For the higher spirits who have that great vision to understand things in a much more ample way, take hands off is the right approach. If we don't have that ample view, perhaps we should act. But again, when reason leads us, that we have reasonable arguments that the right thing to do is to take our hands off, then we should take our hands off.
I I think it's a good point, a good discussion here, and we brought a very interesting point, right? Because when we are facing with these challenges here, we keep repeating that we can only help those that want to be helped, right? This is the direct approach, but even those that do not want to be helped, we can always help through prayers and through positive vibrations, right? So there is always something to do for those that are struggling, even if it's an indirect action, because when you talk about you can only solve a problem if you recognize it is a problem. So many people that are struggling with different issues, addictions, they don't recognize that they have a problem. So there is very little we can do to help directly. But we have to always remember that indirectly through prayers and through positive vibrations, we can always help.
Okay, Wayne.
Wayne.
One of the problems that we have sometimes with compassion is that we open ourselves up for pain via compassion, and then when it's too much, we become callous, and we close ourselves off to feeling the pain of others. And that's hard to remove that again. Just being callous.
By being callous, you mean become indifferent, no longer feeling it?
That's correct. Yeah, have a hardening of the heart as it relates to that that specific pain. You've seen so much of it, it's overwhelming, and so as not to be overwhelmed myself, I'll say myself, by the pain of the situation, you become callous to it, as a way of dealing and coping with it.
Yeah, Stalin, I guess, would defend himself, so to say, but he made a statement that when one person dies, it's a calamity. When 1,000 people die, it's statistics, right? And unfortunately, he's right. Unfortunately, it's a fact. We went through you were just not talking about this a few minutes ago. We just went through a very serious crisis in the highest of the epidemic of COVID, in which just in New York City, 800 people was dying a day, right? Now we have some like 13 or 14,000 people dying a day in the country. So I made the statement, well, 13,000 people is nothing. Have I become callous in making this comparative approach of the highest of the epidemic, we are getting rid of the 800 people that were dying a day? You have to have trucks outside of the hospital, refrigerated trucks outside of the hospitals, all the hospitals in New York City to put bodies. You have no more funerary, no more place in funerary homes to put people. And we are dealing with, in my field, there just watching people die with basically hands tied, with not being able to do anything. If we don't learn to deal with those situations with reason and allow reason to prevail over emotions, we're gonna go crazy. We're not gonna be able to cope. we had in our department, people had to take off and stay away of the hospital. They could not deal with emotionally. When you have to call family member 4, 5, 6 times a day and say, yep, did not make, and unfortunately cannot be here and see and hear their despair, their cries. If you don't develop a thick skin, how can you deal with that situation? Does it mean that you have lost compassion, or does it mean that you allow reason to prevail of compassion? I think that's more of the case. In my field of work, I see people dying every day. I see young people in the 20s, 30s come in with diagnosis of very aggressive brain tumors that, gonna give you the most if you lock another ear. If you don't learn to deal with those, to put your emotions in check, you cannot exercise your function. So I think there is almost a defense mechanism there that put this compassion in check so we can function. And I think that's also a very important point that you brought, that you, as I have said, reason must prevail always. Bad things happen around us, unfortunately. We do the best that we can to assist with compassion, but above all with reason. And I don't think that you become callous in a sense that indifference. It's not indifference. It's not indifference. I think the only negative part to this discussion is exactly the warning from the Spirit of Michael is do not bury it in a sense that you pretend that you don't see, that you don't have, so you don't have to deal with. Gain the intellectual reason ability to deal with it. Because if you just bury it, then it's that fetid things on the bottom over there that eventually is going to have to come out. If you bury it now, eventually it's going to have to surface somehow. But learn the ability to deal with the situations as needed so you can function and be a productive part of the community, helping in the way that you can without transforming yourself and not a burden to that same society.
And I think in Spiritism, we always have to remember that we learn. We are all eternal souls. We are all on this journey towards perfection that we have to go through the process of the trials and expiation. So it's a delicate balance between being compassionate and not getting desperate, because the problem is what Elmo was describing, right? If you get desperate, if you get you despair over their situation, then you become a problem instead of being a solution. So again, not easy. It's a delicate balance, but we need to find a way to be productive. And sometimes the way to be productive is what I almost said. We have to put reason above it. We have to bring our spiritist knowledge, understanding that those that are suffering are going through a learning experience, and on the eternal journey you will end up being a useful lesson. Of course, when you are going through the middle of a personal crisis, it's very difficult to bring this to the forefront. We when we're having our struggles, but it's something that we have always to carry with us, this notion of eternal spirits, right? That this is all a second in our eternal journeys. Our life is just a second. Again, not to be indifferent, which is what Elmo just said here. We cannot bury it and pretend it doesn't exist. But also we cannot despair, because then we become a problem, not a solution.
To deal with the difficulties that we see around us can be extremely frustrating and difficult. You have to allow reason to prevail that we'll do what we can to help. But in this process, we are not going to allow ourselves to become ill and then becomes another problem. We have to be a part of the solution of aggravate the problems. And again, I think there is almost an instinctive behavior that leads us to run away from trouble. And again, the paradigm of Christ is the opposite. Don't run away from trouble. We are here. The divine providence takes care of those who put others above themselves, who act in love and therefore in a selfless manner. All right, any more comments? We can go read Orphans.
Yes. Okay. Orphans 18. Dear brothers, love all the orphans. If you knew how sad it is to be alone and abandoned, especially at a young age, God allows orphans to exist so as to commit us to serve as parents to them. What a divine charity it is to help a poor little abandoned being, to prevent it from suffering of hunger and cold, to guide its soul so it does not get lost in vice. Whoever reaches out to an abandoned child is pleasing to God because he or she understands and practices its law. Also think that often the child you rescue was dear to you in a past incarnation. And if you could remember, it would no longer be charity, but a duty. So therefore, dear friends, every distressed being is your sibling and is entitled to your charity, but not a charity that hurts the heart, not alms that burns the hand in which it falls, because your handouts are often quite bitter. How often would such alms be rejected by the poor if, back at their miserable homes, illness and deprivation were not expecting them? So give gently, add to your alms the most precious benefit of all, a kind word, a gentle touch, a friendly smile. Avoid using this patronizing tone that twists the iron into an already bleeding heart, and think that by doing good, you are actually working for yourself and your nearest and dearest, a familiar spirit.
That's also very current topic in the days that I live in today. Just what is that? Just last week I was listening to NPR, a talk of the orphans of COVID. How many, especially adolescents, have lost both parents to the disease and have been, most of them picked up by an uncle, aunt, to grandparent. We had grandparents dying from COVID, whose parents had already died from COVID. It's a very current topic, the issue of orphans in our community. And I like to expand the definition of orphans beyond just youngsters, children, adolescents. Perhaps adolescents is even more important. Not for those who do not have parents any longer for whatever reason, or those being abandoned by their parents, or parents who have diseased or parents will reject their children, but perhaps even those who live in a household with parents, but unfortunately the parents do not have what's required to educate those children, because one cannot give what one does not have. One cannot teach what one has not learned him or herself yet. I think there's another component of the orphans that we, as spiritists, understanding, as we just covered the last week, was it last week? Was it on the Beatles book, perhaps? The importance of parents was in the Mirror's book. The importance of parents in our lives, the responsibility of parents in the betterment of this world. That when a child comes to this world, the spirit receive that blessing of receiving extra protection and the veil of forgetfulness, so they can start fresh, one open canvas, so we can start painting the most possible beautiful life of those reincarnating spirit. And the importance of good parenting during especially those first 7 years and the next 7 years as well, to redirect whatever direction that spirit was leading before to a direction of goodness, to a direction of moral, ethical values, and perhaps eliminate some of the vices of the past, the great responsibility that we as parents and have towards those newcomers, so to say, in this physical existence. I think there are a lot of orphans out there with parents inside the house that unfortunately the parents does not have the necessary tools to redirect those individuals. Perhaps we'll even place those newcomers at a risk of aggravating even more the situation, following the examples they are receiving inside of the household. And that's that statement, it takes a village. It's absolutely truthful. When we read a little bit in physical anthropology, we see that most of I would use the word simple over here in a very, actually scary, because I don't know the best word to use, but the most simple societies, the tribes, living a more simple life. They seem to understand this concept very well, in which every mother is a mother for all of the kids. They recognize all of the kids as almost their own, and they lead, they take care of everyone, give them values, particular to that tribe, to that community, of course. That at one point in our life, we seem to devalue the importance of this. Takes a tribe and becomes a more selfish society, in a sense. I'll take care of my kids, that period, you take care of your kids. Unfortunately, since there is even some laws that makes us scared to take action, to do something, afraid of that they're gonna sue me because I approach that kid, because I asked that kid to put down that cigarette that's not good for him or her. And it becomes a big thing, but I think the issue of orphans goes beyond the rescuing the ones that does not have parents, but at a time rescue those kids from their own parents, It's a big enterprise, of course. And I know that I'm stretching this definition very, very far. But I think if we do not accept the responsibility of parenting those who do not have parents, we will sow to ourselves a very heavy and consequence of this selfishness. If we do not accept the responsibility of educating those who have no one to educate them, how can we later demand that they act in an educated manner? If we do not provide the minimum required to have some, for survive, number one, and then, as I spoke last week, to have some dignity, and they choose out of having those moral values that was never taught to them. If they choose to come and take what they believe they have the right, how can you really blame them if we don't blame ourselves for not acting when we could have acted and provide to those youngsters a better direction of their lives? I think we are today in our society, especially, and if we go more towards third world countries, showing the consequences of this selfishness, to let them fence for themselves, to let them go and figure things on their own, and then come and demand that they act in a proper way, since once no one was there to give them a proper direction, a proper guidance. So it's a current topic that deals with our lives today, that we have to barricade ourselves inside of houses with walls that more resides out of small feudal communities to keep the poor and the ignorant outside of those walls. But unfortunately, we can't, because we ourselves have to get out of the wall. When we get out of the wall, we have to face them that perhaps are coming to take what belongs to them one way or another. The issue of who is that orphan? Who is that kid who is now an orphan and needs parent? Could it be someone that we knew from previous existence, someone that if we could look in the past, is someone to whom we actually own tremendous amount of favors? Yes, it's important, but I really don't care about that. I think if we go thinking about, oh, this is an eternal spirit, I mean, eternal spirit, we perhaps have an established relationship in the past. I do feel that if that's the case, there is something that will lead us to that kind of thought. Spiritist or not, we have a different kind of feeling towards that individual, not orphans in general, but that individual, that specific orphan. There is something that will lead us towards that individual, and maybe a positive feeling, maybe a negative feeling. How to be even more careful with the negative feelings, the ones that gives me a feeling of stay away from this kid, is the one that perhaps we should get closer and closer, that perhaps we have some relationship of the past that needs some kind of adjustment. I would not put that at the top of my discussion, because then it becomes more than a charity. It becomes a necessity to revisit relationships of the past, and then it becomes more a need to do something for someone that we own something, or for someone that we who owes on us something, whatever, but it's not the pure sense of charity that you just do the good for the sake of good, period. I think we need to learn to do the good for the sake of good, assume responsibility that indeed takes a village. And it is not, it's beyond an individual decision. We do our part, but there is so much more involved in it that really requires a transformation, a re-education of the whole society to bring this statement that takes a village more seriously and start to act on it. Because I do not have the right to ask a kid over there to behave properly when nobody thought to that individual what is a proper and an inappropriate behavior. And when someone is in need for the minimum required for survival one and some dignity second, they will try to get it one way or another. If you get them, more important, you provide that to them, then they don't have to break into our homes to get it. They don't need to join those gangs in order to get it, what family will not provide to offer. They will not to get into destruction of drug addiction to try to alleviate their pain in a state of hallucination. Comments, questions?
This is a challenging subject always, right? Because you can think of orphans at that time that Kardec wrote this, which was orphans were really abandoned in the streets, right? And nowadays we still see orphans abandoned in the streets, and but we have many so-called orphans inside the houses, right, with parents that work day and have no time to take care of them and leave them. And the discussion, who should educate, right? The parents or the schools, and then this go on and on. This, so yeah, always a relevant subject for reflect. Again, it's for reflection. Everything that we're discussing today is food for thought for all of us, always, right?
Yeah, an absolute current topic. And of course, we can think of orphans in accordance with the part of the world that we live in, right? I mean, we can talk of orphans specifically, let's say, in poor countries or poor areas of the country like Brazil, and orphans in New York City in a different way, but at the end it's the same thing. Is the orphans. By orphans, I'm referring to individuals, youngsters arriving here in this physical world as a blank canvas, so to say. Hunger, thirst for guidance, for understanding, for some love, and for some TLC, and does not find here. These are the orphans, but unfortunately, some of the orphans are inside of households with parents inside of it. But of course, there are the other orphans that are already born rejected, they're already born neglected, that will never have, a guarantee of a bread the next day. That I don't know, a case that Devout says that the mother was giving the child cardboard to eat as the only thing that could possibly get to that child to eat. It's perhaps inconceivable in New York City, but it's happening throughout this world right now. And that's so we say there is a sequence of steps that need to be taken and exercise of charity. And one, of course, guarantee the survival, guarantee nutrition, protect from environment, to guarantee the minimum essential some degree of dignity. Every child needs some affection. Every child needs some love, something that gives that child some self-esteem, some hope of a better future. If they don't can get, they don't get it in the household, they have to get it somewhere else, because the vultures out there, the gangs formations and the drug addictions, they are there, and that may be the last resource that those kids will find. And yet again, Ron said very properly, it's a very ample discussion that has been taken by the whole society. Whose responsibility is that? Is that government responsibility? That school responsibility? It's my responsibility as a Christian, as a spiritist, to have this discussion here now. Hard, very hard discussion. We move on to benefits repaid to the ingratitude. That's a really, really juicy topic as well.
Okay. Benefits repaid with ingratitude. What should we think of people who, having been paid with ingratitude for all their benefits, no longer do good for fear of coming across ungrateful people? Such people have more selfishness than charity, for failing to do good only for fear of not receiving appreciation is not doing it disinterestedly, and only a selfish benefit, a selfless benefit is pleasing to God. It is also pride, because they indulge in the humility of recipients that show their appreciation by bowing at their feet. Those who seek on earth the reward for the good they make will not receive it in heaven. However, God will take into account those who do not seek it on earth. One must always help the weak, even when knowing in advance that those to whom one does good will not be grateful. Know what if those to whom you are donating forget the benefit received, God will take it more into account than if you were already rewarded by the recipient's appreciation. Sometimes God lets you to be paid back with ingratitude to test your resolve in doing good. Moreover, how do you know if this benefit, momentarily forgotten, will not later bear good fruit? On the contrary, rest assured that it is a seed that will eventually germinate. Unfortunately, over time, you will always see only the present. You work for yourself, not for others. Benefits given will eventually soften the most hardened hearts. They may be misunderstood here below, but when the spirit is rid of its cardinal veil, it will remember it, and this memory will be its punishment. Then it will regret its ingratitude and wish to make up for its fault, to pay its debt in another existence, often even by accepting a life of devotion to its benefactor. Thus, without suspecting it, you will have contributed to the Spirit's moral advancement, and later you will recognize all the truth contained in this maxim. A good deed is never lost. But in this way, you will also have worked for yourself, for you will have the benefit of having done good selflessly and without being deterred by any disappointments. Ah, my dear friends, if you knew all the links which in the current life tie you to your previous existences, if you could encompass the multitude of relationships that bring people together for their mutual progress, you would admire even better the wisdom and kindness of the Creator, which allows you to be born again in order to reach it, a spirit guide.
I think the question is also very current. I think it's a question that always comes to our mind in a very personal sense. So instead of we ask what should you think of persons, but put ourselves as the persons whose beneficence has been repaid with ingratitude and who therefore no longer practice the good out of fear of meeting more ungrateful people. In a simple way, it comes to what I have said. We do good for the sake of goodness, period. And period, that's it. We do good for the sake of doing good. We help others because of their needs, not our need. Do I help others because I have a need of recognition? I have a need to be recognized as good, or I do good to others because others need their assistance? Can we bargain with God? Can you negotiate with God? For everything that we are, for everything that we have, is an expression of the love of God towards us. Can we even consider trying to negotiate or to bargain with God? You know, if I hire someone and before the work I sit down with that person, I say, I'm hiring, I'm going to pay X weekly, and you have to perform A, B, C, and D functions. Are you okay with that? Are we good with that? Can we shake hands here? Yes, I'm good. That's not a problem. I love it. Let me start. Fine. And 3-4 days later, that person comes to me and say, if you want me to do B, you have to pay me extra. In my ignorance, that person will be looking for another job the very next day. Because we shook hand, and what the work description was A, B, C, and D, and it is what we shake hand, and that's it. There is no more bargaining here. There is no more talk over here. The divine laws imprinted in our conscience has this O, A, B, C, and D imprinted in it. It's true, we did not shake hand, but coming from God is what's good for us, because God's perfect and his love is perfect, and therefore A, B, C, and D is perfect for us. And we cannot change perfection. We cannot bargain with perfection. And Christ suggests to us that we are all gods, that we can do what he has done and much more. And God suggests to us to be perfect as our Father who is in heaven. Therefore, we need to learn to exercise charity in the perfect form, which it is doing good for the sake of good. Because at the moment that it becomes a bargain, and it becomes a bargain if I'll do good for you if you recognize my goodness. I do good to you if you say at least thank you. I do good to you if now every time that I pass on the streets and you see me, you bow to me so everybody around can see that I do good to others. It's no longer charity. It's an exchange. It's a bargain. And it reflects our selfishness and, more important, our pride way above our ability to be charitable. And if charity is this big umbrella that encompasses all the virtues, there is no room for selfishness, there is no room for pride. Are we there yet? No. Should we put the absolutely greater effort to get there? Of course, we should. But if you think that you're gonna go through this life, and every time that you do something to someone, will you be receiving recognition that every time that you do something good, will you receive gratitude back, that you will not experience gratitude? I think we should just look at ourselves in our past, if with being really objective and sincere, check if you have not been ungrateful to someone, that you have not realized the value of what someone has done to us in the past. It may be a friend that you'd hang out on a regular basis. It could be a teacher. It could be even our parents. I even leave parents out of the equation because definitely all of us will definitely recognize a few moments and a few ingratitudes of ours to other parents. In this process of maturing, of growing up, we ourselves have been ungrateful to others, and to expect that everyone that receives something from us must be grateful, it's a big stretch, expecting from others what not even ourselves are able to give at this moment. And again, you display our pride and selfishness above all things, way above our ability to exercise charity, because we are bargaining, we expect something in return. And if you expect something in return, it's no longer charity. Someone comes to you and say, I'm going to give $1 million. What do you say? Well, I'll say thank you. And the person says, what are you going to do for me? Well, so you're not going to give me $1 million. You want to negotiate $1 million. You want something back for that, to that $1 million. And then I may not do it according to what you're asking. If it's agreeable with my conscience, if it's legal, if it's not unlawful, perhaps I'll do, perhaps I don't. But that's not only giving me anything. It's expecting a return for something. So it's not giving now. So it's an exchange. It's a negotiation. It's a bargain. Depends on what that person's asking. It's a good deal. For me, it may not be. Depends on what that person's asking. If you do something for someone, you should not expect anything, because it's no longer giving. It's negotiating. It's bargaining. No, it may be just a thank you. I demand that you say at least thank you if I give you $1. If you don't say a thank you, I'm never gonna give $1 again. And even worse, I'm not gonna give anybody $1 again, because that person did not give me $1. It's extreme selfishness and pride that we need recognition. I know it's a normal society. I know it's part of our ethical social manners over here, that if someone do something to you, you say thank you, you recognize it. But how many times have we not recognized? How many times have not even recognized that what was done was actually a help? And how many times later on we have that recognition? Oh man, thank God that person told me this one time. Thank God that person did that for me sometime. Now I see how helpful it's been for me. You know, I think part of growing up, we recognize those things in the past. So as the spirit says over here, a good deed never goes, it's never wasted, it's never lost. Whatever we've done today is not lost. It's there. But if you attach that good deed to the necessity of a reward, then it's already lost. It's already lost. And not everyone, not everybody has matured enough to be able to be grateful to what people do to them. In the book, Ivone Pereira book, Recordações da Mediunidade, remembering mediumship, so to say. She tells the episode of when she was a young girl, and her parents who had turned spiritists because of all her events in her infancy, that she had those cataleptic states and everything else, and when nothing else seems to help you, then you find some medium to try to help. They eventually become spiritists because of all the events that happened to her in her infancy. And they have a little piece of land, and they live in that piece of land. They have one little tiny house in the back, and a mother and a teenage daughter went looking for help and assistance, and the parents actually say, you can stay in that little house for a little bit, for a few days, until you catch up with your life and you move on. And they would ask, the parents would ask the daughter to go and bring some food for those two poor persons, the daughter and the mother. And when she used to go over there, they would take the food, whatever was given to them, with some snobbish kind of attitude and say, don't you have this, don't you have that, asking for better food, and demand the next time you come in, bring this, bring that, bring so. And she would get infuriated. She would get so angry. Say, these people, my daddy give them a place for them to stay. We bring them food. They still have the gut to demand, to ask for this and for that, almost giving a menu what to bring the next time around. And the parents just laugh at her simplicity of her, how much should have to grow up and mature to understand that they are helping those young ladies, that couple, that mother and daughter, for their need of getting some food, of getting a place to stay, not expecting anything in return. That is true charity. Perhaps that mother and that daughter will live in that state of ignorance that will prevent them to be grateful to what others are doing to them. But what one can imagine, especially after you read the book Heaven and Hell that we studied together, that eventually that lack of gratitude, that the display of ingratitude, of pride, would hit them hard in the future. That those are very strong, severe debt they are acquiring with their pride. And we are not to be the ones to put an extra layer of suffering upon them with our negative energies. Some people are just not ready to be grateful, but they are ready to be helped. They need to be helped now. And we are ready to provide the help that they need, not what we need. Comments, questions? So we can complete the topic.
Yes, exclusive beneficency. Number 20. Is beneficency better understood when it is exclusive to people of the same opinion, same belief, or same party? No. It stands above any notion of sect or party, which should all be abolished, because all humans are brothers and sisters. True Christians only see brothers and sisters in their fellow beings, and before rescuing the needy, they do not inquire from them what they believe, what their belief is, or what opinion they hold on anything. Would you be following the precepts of Jesus Christ, who says to love even one's enemies? If you reject a poor person because he or she has a different faith from your own, let everyone rescue him and her without asking for any account of his or her conscience. Because if the latter is an enemy of religion, it is the means of making him or her love, whereas by pushing such a person away, you would only make him or her be filled with hate. St. Louis.
Talking about current events, current topic of discussion. Can anyone bring a much more need discussion than this one? What is happening to us right now? What seems the greatest, one of the most difficult topic for us to deal right now? The big, serious cancer that is extremely aggressive and is corroding our moral ethical values, with causing so much harm for us today that does not let us to move on to progress, because we are so divided that we are putting ourselves in extremes so far to the right and so far to the left that it don't have the intelligence of the heart and even of the brain to try to move towards the middle, where the truth prevails and where we'll be able to help everyone equally, regardless of ideologies, than what we are suffering today, not only in this country, but everywhere that you, unfortunately, you open the news to read something, you get depressed to see so much radicalism, so much fanaticism in one direction without the ability to open the ears to listen what's coming from the other side, without putting the effort to move towards the center. I don't think there's anything more urgent in our society than this today, to try to eliminate the divides. And if it was of something important of the time, it becomes increasingly much more important today. And so Louis, it's very clear. The spiritual sectarism and political parties must be abolished, for all humans are brothers and sisters. True Christians see only brothers and sisters in their fellow beings, and therefore helping those who are in need. They do not ask from them about what their beliefs or opinions might be. Is this extremely difficult to practice? It seems to be, right? It says that, unfortunately, especially for among those who label themselves Christians, who put that big, bright neon lights on their forehead and say Christian, 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 and act exactly contrary to what we had just read over here. But again, not surprising. Christ himself warned us. There shall be false prophets. There shall be wolves dressed in sheep clothes. For how long now? Have we reached the bottom yet? I feel that we are pretty much close to the bottom, and then we're gonna have to act and move a little bit towards the medium to the middle, to become a little bit more Christians and act in accordance to his teachings, in which we have the need. We have the need for the need that he or her has. That we must unite our power in what is good and what is way above us, and not allow the little differences to stagnate our progress. And what we have in common is exactly Christ. And we have to begin to act according to Paul's suggestions as if Christ was acting through us, and that is to eliminate those divisions. We're not going to eliminate ideologies. We're not going to eliminate different views, different opinions. That's not going to happen until you reach a much, much higher level, close to the Christs. But you must eliminate the hate, and you must eliminate the idea that I can only help those who think like I think, who has the same skin color that I have. We speak the same language that I speak, and expand by necessity of ourselves. Expand the definition of our family, expand the definition of Christianity, or perhaps to redefine the truth to Christianity. That we help for the sake of helping, that you help the good for the sake of doing good. And this statement, I think, is like so precious, so precious. I think we have spoken this with perhaps using 1,000 words, and St. Louis again is able to do in few words. Help them without asking them to give an account of their conscience. How dare can we ask anyone around us to give us an account of their conscience? Are we playing ourselves in the position of gods? I mean, yeah, God, Jesus told us, we are all gods, but this is give us the green light for now to demand an account from others. How do you think? How do you, what do you believe before I extend my hand to you? Again, I think is the greatest necessity, I think, moral that we are living today is the ability to move towards the center, the ability to listen without having that need to scream louder than anyone else, to impose our beliefs, our way of seeing things. If we do, through this doctrine, have gained the understanding of our spirituality, of reincarnation, not as a religion thinks, but as a part of our existence. Does it make us better or worse than anyone else? On the contrary, everyone else maybe think that we are worse for having that belief. We're going to argue, we're going to stop helping them because they don't share the same belief, or even think that we are in association with the devil because of it. amongst us spiritists, but again, it's a universal problem, it's a human problem to try at all cost to move towards the middle, to eliminate radicalism from ourselves, so we'll be able to help others, regardless of who they are, what they think, and never in any way ask for their accounts of their own conscience. So comments, questions? Any Draw any announcement?
Yeah, so a couple of announcements. Next Sunday, we have a letter by our friend Luis Vilaza, Matter and its Constitution. He will, in this lecture, will begin with a historical perspective of philosophical and scientific views of the concept of matter, evolving up to the present day. Scientific interpretations of matter and its constitution will seek to establish parallels between current scientific theories and the Spiritist teachings on the subject. So you're all invited for Sunday, 11 a.m. for our lecture, right? So this is Sunday, January the 23rd. Also, same day starts the initiation into Spiritism course by the United States Spiritist Federation. At 10 a.m. you need to register, and but of course it's free and it's online. You can go to the United States Spiritist Federation website and you will have all the information there. You'll be a series of 40 classes on Spiritism for those that are beginners, but also for those who want to reinforce their understanding and their views on Spiritism, okay? There is a book accompanying the course that is available also to purchase at the United States Spiritist Federation website. And that's it, Elmo.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you all next week. And so I would like to make the final prayer.
Yes, of course. And to our beloved Christ Jesus, our spiritual benefactors, who have participated here in joining us with our beloved teachers, giving us the need of understanding, the love of charity and giving. May we understand this lesson and take in our hearts to do all that we can to follow our Father's steps, the goodness of caring for others and caring for their needs, to understand the power of prayers to help and give all that we can. We are grateful as we gather here today again. May we take these beautiful lessons in our hearts to work toward the light and the betterment of humanity. We pray, dear Father, for all that are going through the suffering in this pandemic that continues to plague our universe here. May we understand to give, to pray, to have faith, giving them the courage and strength that they need as we all go through our daily lives and finding the peace within ourselves through prayer. We pray, dear Father, for all that have lost and going through financial difficulties, for those that don't have a place to lie their heads, to be warm in this frigid weather that we have now. We pray, dear Father, that they be cared for, helping them through all the struggles in life. But we know that you're with us, dear Lord, and we must do our part. We give thanks to the United States Spiritist Federation for the United States Spiritist Councils that continue to give us enlightenment with talks on Saturdays, giving us the understanding that we're not alone, helping us to continue this path and following our Father's footsteps with charity and with love. We pray, dear Father, that we continue throughout the week to meet in our meetings throughout the week, continue our studies at home, and most important, our prayers each and every day, giving thanks to enlightenment, to all that we have much to be grateful. We thank you, dear Lord. And with that in mind, we ask permission to close this meeting today. So be it.